So, Katrina, we got connected, I believe, through a friend who I connected to at the Gathering conference in Banff, right, Ryan?
Yeah. Yes, Ryan.
And so the thing I was super excited to talk to you about is that you kind of bill yourself as a sabbatical coach. So career break and sabbatical coach, former corporate drone and fellow MBA as I am. And we had a great conversation when we first chatted. And so I wanted to kind of bring that live to the world and also, do something a little bit different and have kind of like an ask me anything. So if anyone has any questions about sabbaticals, coaching, just raise your hand and we will pull you into the conversation. Otherwise, we will just talk.
It's awesome. Excited for this.
Cool. So, yeah, just to get started, tell me about what led you to this work. So you took a sabbatical like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, almost 10 years ago. Gosh, that's crazy. Yes, I did.
So what was your
And
life
it,
like leading up to that? What made you do it?
yeah, well, I think, well, what was true for me, I was in my second career. So I started as a healthcare actuary, did that for 8 years, decided that that was not going to be my life anymore, and went to get my MBA because that seemed like the very smart and wise thing to do. So I went full time, got my MBA, and started career number two, which was market research. And I worked for General Mills at the time. So I was living out in Minneapolis. And I was expecting this whole new career to create a whole new me and a whole new life. And what I found about 8 months in is that I had given myself new surroundings, much colder, much snowier, but essentially was bringing all of these unfulfilled desires with me. And I was just feeling very misaligned with the corporate setting and really just desiring this time off to go see the world. So for me, I had this long list of 1 day places, all these places I wanted to see, all these experiences I wanted to have. And when you do the math on a corporate career, all those days off when you think about holidays, family time. And so I started working with a life coach to figure out what was true for me. And she helped me own the fact that I just wanted to take a break and travel around the world for a year. And so I had like $1,500 in my bank account and knew that I needed like way more money than that to take a break. So I got really serious about saving. I saved 40K in 18 months. And then I
Nice.
left my job and I traveled around the world until I spent all that money, which was about 20 months.
All right, I have so many questions. First, it's like rewinding. What made you want to do actuary work? Like, how did did your family do that kind of work? Like, what led you into that line?
Yeah, I actually knew nothing about actuaries. I was at Smith College with a math degree, unsure of what I was going to do with it. All I really knew was that you could be a teacher. That's what everyone kept telling me. You could teach
Mhm.
math. And I was like, but I don't really like kids. So like, I don't know how that's going to work out. But I ended up getting headhunted and recruited to be an actuary because
Hmm.
they're, great need for actuaries. And so I learned what it was through the recruiting process. And so it accidentally became my first career. And, what really sold me on it was it felt like a really exciting way to, get my foot in the door with a corporate career and to really just kind of see the world a little bit more and crack it open and put my math degree to use. And I was working for a consulting firm. So I also love the idea of like working on a project and seeing it from several different angles.
Mhm.
And the best part was that I got to move to Atlanta, which is where I wanted to be. So I was very, very excited. And it paid really well too. So I was very excited for that first job.
Yeah, this might be the only time someone said that they were super excited to figure out what actuaries do.
Yeah.
But when I
Yeah.
think when I think back on it, the only other actuary that I know is a math major as well. So it feels like that's the path. And
Yeah.
then
Mhm.
did you always have it? It sounds like you didn't have it in your mind to do an MBA, but you kind of viewed that as a way to like re-examine what you want to do for work. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was feeling stuck because it was like golden handcuffs in this career, right? There's great job security, it pays well. Like there are a lot of people that are really happy in that job because math is their thing and they love being an actuary. So I felt a little bit crazy for not feeling fulfilled and not wanting to stay. And it's like this great job, like who leaves this great job? But it was not me. It wasn't where I wanted to be. And I knew if I didn't leave soon, I was just never going to leave because it was only going to get harder to leave. And so at the end of the day, what was true for me is that I needed a change, but I didn't know how to change. And I was very tied to my corporate salary. And so I was looking at options that would let me make a change without creating too much of a loss on the salary side. And I had a friend actually suggest business school. And I was like, that's ridiculous. I don't want to be an accountant. And he's like, oh my God, Katrina, like business school is so much more than just accounting. And I was like, it is? I really didn't know much about it. So then I started doing my research and I started really like learning what business school was. And then I was really excited about it. Felt like this portal or this doorway to a bunch of new possibilities. So once I got serious, I started applying and I ended up getting a consortium fellowship at UNC. And that was really exciting for me. But for me, it was like business school is the portal through which I will find a new life and a new career and a new path. And while, yes, I got so much out of it, that was actually when I traveled abroad for the first time at like age
Mm.
29, which was very exciting for me. It ultimately led me back into corporate, which I realized was not where I wanted to be ultimately.
Yeah, business school has a way of doing that. I
Yeah.
so I think of business school as the world's most socially acceptable sabbatical. So you talk about it as being a portal. At the time, I felt like it was this, stepping stone to get to the next thing. But really looking back, it was this way to kind of open the aperture on what's even possible. So I mean, you
Yes.
you talk about like some of the, being able to travel for the first time. Like I didn't even know that careers like private equity and things existed, and just seeing that there were other humans who were doing a whole host of other jobs, I think helped me to just see what was possible. And it's this message that you send to the world with, I remember you get recruited, you go to like a job fair the first month that you're on campus, and you're like, I am the exact same person as I was a month ago.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden,
Yes.
you're getting all these different opportunities. So I feel like if
Yeah.
there was a business school like thing for just folks exploring at that point in their career where they didn't have to tie themselves further to a career like law school or med school, I think that would be fantastic for folks.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that. Like I often do think of my years, my 2 years at business school as sort of being a break unto itself because to your point, it was like blowing my mind with all these possibilities. And you meet people that come from all different types, right? All different types of jobs, all different types of backgrounds. But then they're also creating every kind of club and every kind of experience. And so it's like literally anything in your mind that you're curious about, there's probably someone in your orbit that has done it or that knows someone that has done it. And like you said, all these recruiters just showing up on campus, wanting to talk to you. And so it's like, wow, it's kind of like I'm floating in this new space and I'm figuring it out. But there was so much freedom in that experience as well.
Yeah, and then one thing I wanted to note is that UNC, I don't know what the consortium fellowship is. I want to hear about that, but UNC seems to be a place that's doing really innovative stuff. I know they have a gap year program, so they partnered with my friend's company, Global Citizen Year, to offer folks like actual gap year program, and they get like an $8,000 scholarship, like stipend to spend
Wow.
over the course of that year. So it sounds like
Yeah, that's
UNC is really
awesome.
doing interesting stuff. What was the consortium fellowship?
Yeah, so the consortium is I guess it's a nonprofit, but they basically are this organization that works to increase the number of underrepresented minorities in business. And so there is like a fellowship within that. So, like UT Austin and Yale and UNC. And I think at the time there were probably 13, but they've continued to grow since then. So there's this consortium of business school programs. And so you can apply to go through the consortium, and the consortium will award some students full tuition fellowship. So that was really exciting, and it opened a door for me that I'm not sure I would have been able to go through
Hmm.
without that support. So I was very grateful for that.
So, all that withstanding, it sounds like you kind of came from kind of corporate consulting and then you found yourself like tractor beamed back into it. Why was that the approach you took? You mentioned that you had grown kind of comfortable with the salary or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was part of it. But you know what? Honestly, DJ, I wanted to be successful. And I think at that time, I still hadn't really taken the big step back, the scary step back to really reevaluate my life. And so when you get to MBA, right, when you're in business school, it's like all these big, sexy companies are there and everyone's competing for the 3 internship spots that they have. And it was like, I wanted to be one of the three. I didn't even really ask myself, like, do I really want that if I get it? I just knew I wanted to, like, air quotes, win, right? And so I think those are the dangling carrots. And so I was just like, oh, I'm here. This is what is like the top of the top is going for. I need to go for it. I need to figure it out. And so, I was really good at interviewing, and having an actuarial background was the best freaking background I could have come into the program with. Like half of the classes I had already like studied, self-studied to pass actuarial exams for.
Mm,
And so it was just like, it was actually not as hard for me as, some other people that hadn't done that stuff in a while or ever. And so it was just this really fascinating journey. But, I got 6 offers pretty quickly my first year for internships. And so it was like all that winning just begets more wanting to win. And so I think I was just, I was just chasing, I was like, what's success? Tell me what success is. And somebody would point off in the distance and I would just start running without asking myself, like, do I really want to end up where that path leads?
yeah. No, it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my experience was different, because I felt like an outsider. I was, like a philosophy major and politics in
Mm-hmm.
undergrad, and we came a month early to do this thing they called analytics, which was basically kind of
Oh,
math
yeah.
camp for folks who weren't in consulting and banking and things.
Yeah.
And so that gave me this group of people that was like, okay, we're probably not going to be doing traditional business when we graduate. We didn't come from there. It was a lot of like veterans and teachers and Peace Corps volunteers. And I didn't even apply to a job in business school because I was concerned that I would be tempted to take that job because I knew that the salary that I would get
Oh.
would be more than I had gotten before and more than I was kind of planning on doing if I was going to be an entrepreneur. And that led to another stressful thing, which was, getting to my second year and having no idea what I was going to do. But this kind of entrepreneurial opportunity just dropped in my lap because I was like just telling folks this is the kind of thing I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we had different paths, but I think ended up at the same place. And so I realize we're spending a lot of time on your MBA, which I just kind of like find that fascinating. But so
Yeah.
tell me, so you went into a career and then you like decided at some point that that wasn't authentic to what you wanted to do and you took time off, right? So tell me what you were thinking kind of at that point in time before you took the sabbatical.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, holy crap, how did I end up back here? That is what I was thinking. I
Yeah.
felt very, in some ways, I think it was even more corporate. It was really putting myself in that MBA world and that climbing culture where you're always on the ladder and you're always climbing. And now we're going to do the like company rating and we're going to give you a number and we're going to let you know every minute of every day how you rate against your peers. So you always
Yeah.
feel inadequate. And so, it was just really exhausting and unfulfilling. And one thing about me that's true is once I have a realization that whatever I'm in no longer fits, it's really hard for me to ignore that. And I also have been someone I'm very acutely aware of how short time is, like that we take it for granted that you get one chance. And so I think when I had this realization, oh my gosh, I've actually ended up in a worse place alignment wise, and I'm not happy. And when I look forward in my life, all I'm doing on this path is recreating more of the same. I know
Mm.
I have to get off, but I don't know how. But like I also feel acutely where I got to find an answer because otherwise I'm going to blink and be 65 and retiring and feel like, wow, like now that I'm 65, I get to start living my life and finding some joy. And so that was how I ended up with a life coach, is because I had a lot of questions and I had no answers and I wanted someone to help me figure that stuff out.
I'm curious why do you think that you are acutely aware of the importance of time? Is that's something
Yeah.
that I feel like for me and I think for a lot of people it takes some like tragic event happening, like
Mm-hmm.
some major life quake, as Bruce Feiler calls it, to say like, oh wow, this is precious, and like that's what we went through with the pandemic, right? It's like
Yeah.
everyone saw that life is precious. Everyone saw how we were spending our time as like work and life got turned up to 11. So what do you think gave you that perception?
Yeah, I can't pinpoint a specific event or a reason. I wonder sometimes if I'm an old soul and like in my last lifetime, there was just a sense of urgency that I did not heed. But what's true for me is that I've always had this sense of wanderlust and like this desire to see the world. And I've also felt at the same time that I've got to do it now because waiting, it's going to be too late. And maybe, some of that is being reflected in families that like family members that waited too long, right? And
Yeah.
just seeing them not making those choices or not feeling so fulfilled in life and happy, and thinking to myself, I don't want to end up like that, so I've got to do it while I'm still young. I've got to do it when I have this awareness. But speaking of tragic events, I had planned for this break for over a year and a half, like probably 2 years all in, 18 months of saving plus some life coaching beforehand. And I gave 8 months notice at General Mills. So I'm like on my path. I know when I'm leaving. And 1 week before my break started, my younger brother unexpectedly passed away. And he was my favorite person. He was only 30 years old. It was really, really, really devastating. And I remember just the one positive like emotion that kind of came in through all of that grief and all of that heaviness was like, thank you, Katrina, for being somebody who didn't wait to live your life, because he wasn't the impetus for me to start living. I was already
Yeah.
trying to live. I was already going for that. And it was just confirmation versus like this epiphany. It was just this confirmation that like, yes, nothing is guaranteed. Thank you so much, to my to myself and this inner voice that wouldn't be quiet that said, you've got to get out, you've got to go, you got to fly. It's scary, but there time's a wasting. And I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that that is how I was living up until, that moment, and that I continue to live.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of hearts from the listeners right now.
Oh, thank you
Um,
guys.
that's awesome, and I think that's something I hear very often, which is, folks are saving up for retirement and they get there and their spouse passes away, or they can't, they have some kind of debilitating thing that doesn't allow them to have the retirement that they want to have. So it's definitely not guaranteed. A couple things
Did you
go ahead.
I just want to ask you, DJ, so did you have like an event that brought you extra awareness on the like the fleeting sense of that is time, or how did you sort of like start to embrace that more?
Yeah. As you say, I think I've always been like a bit of an old soul and kind of a seeker. So there was stuff that I wanted to do that I felt like was important but never urgent. Like I wanted to
Hmm.
invest more in the spiritual side. I remember about 2 years before I took the sabbatical, I was living in Indonesia. I had to move there like suddenly because one of our like heads of Asia quit, and I had to like, close the deal kind of thing. And I was reading a lot about Stoicism, a lot about Buddhism, and I was like, man, I just really want to explore this more, but I don't think you can do it in kind of bite-sized chunks, or like that's at least not the way that I wanted to do it. And so, I was wanting to kind of spend time doing that. And then I didn't have an acute instance. I had just kind of this like slowly grinding down that I now know is burnout. And I think at that time, 7 years ago, I don't really think the conversation was as prevalent around burnout. So I certainly didn't really know about it. And I especially didn't know about it from the perspective of being someone who was in my dream job, air quotes, right? Like
Yeah.
I thought you burn out from being in, a job you hate, not from being in a job that you love and you're kind of giving too much of yourself around. So yeah, it was like a slow moving like train collision.
Yeah, that
as,
makes
as
sense.
opposed to like some, and I kind of found myself. Yeah, I remember my kind of co-founder and partners were like, "Hey, I've noticed you're not shaving your face a lot recently, and like you don't look
Yeah.
so great. Like how's it going? Maybe you could, and just like those kind of nudges, and then I was just like, I don't know. I need to take time off. So yeah, it was not that. But it was like bubbling up of wanting to do things that I felt like there wasn't time to do. And like
Yeah.
my ability to do anything kind of decreasing with like that lack of efficacy that's kind of, central to the definition of burnout. But yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. And I mean, I can relate to that. I feel like mine's the same story, except it's instead of like efficacy, it was just desire, right? Like what was waning for me was the desire to show up and to do anything, just feeling so misaligned in
Yeah, and I
many
was
ways.
I was speaking at an event from the African Leadership University they're up in Silicon Valley for a month. So it's like 30 students that are visiting Silicon Valley. And one of the students was developing a product to kind of deal with burnout. So like, can you develop an app that's connected to your calendar to kind of give you reminders of, you're overscheduling or you need to have breaks and that kind of thing. And it made me think about, my experience trying to like disconnect. And I know that, you're obviously an advocate for sabbaticals and this broader and more extended aspect of connecting. Like, what do you think is the difference between helping someone create better work-life balance and like advising someone to go on an extended leave? And I don't know if you advise that to everybody or if, selection bias people come to you because you're a career break and sabbatical coach. But what do you think is the difference there?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like time off is great for everyone. Like I would love to give the gift of time to anyone that wants it. I feel like sometimes we hit that wall and it's like there's not enough to give. It's kind of like we're running on a partially charged 20% battery. And so it doesn't matter how often we plug it in at night, like the phone has to turn off first before we can actually like get back to the full charge. Like you have to turn it off, let it reset, and then like let it rest and charge.
Mm.
And I feel like we're hesitant to do that. And so for me, I believe that a full on reset is so valuable to, to anyone that wants to take that time. I think that if you're in a situation that feels generally pretty good and you're just struggling with creating that balance, and so you're feeling tired, but you're not feeling like you have these burning desires to do life completely differently, or to take this massive trip, or to write the novel, or to do, to do this sort of big hairy goal. It's like, I love the life I have, or I really enjoy it, I just need more me time, or I need more balance. I think that's a different conversation. But yes, there is some self-selection to the people that come to me, and for them to reach out to me, there's a part of them, even if they won't acknowledge it on the surface, there's a subconscious part of them that knows they just want to completely disconnect from work life for a while and really start to change their life. And what I find is that the people that come to me oftentimes want post break or post sabbatical them to be different and on a different path than the pre sabbatical version of themselves. So they're looking for that break as a catalyst for that transformation.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of, I think there's a category of folks who know they want to change. There's a category of folks who something is just like not right and bubbling up, and that's probably folks that
Mm-hmm.
are, like starting to talk to coaches. And then I think there's the category of folks who like you know, have been in this milieu for so long that they don't know that they need to change. And so I'm down in the Modern Elder Academy in Baja, Mexico for the next 2 months, and I interacted with someone who I'll call Bart, who was down there, and he was just like, listen, I've never taken a break in my entire life. I've got kids that I'm dealing with, and a career and everything like that, and he had just never done anything like this. And they were there for, I think, a week or 10 days. And after that, it was the first time that he saw, oh, having this unscheduled time and actually making space for things to bubble up was the first time that he had paused and stepped back enough to say, I could see myself wanting to do more of this. So I think it kind of like catalyzed
Oh,
a
wow.
longer break.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if we're just on that like busy train, I think it's hard to even see that as a possibility for many folks. It might be generational, but
Yeah, no, I think there probably is some element of that, but you're absolutely right. I think for some people it's not even in the awareness, because you think about if you're running on the wheel, right? It's like you can't stop, you're just going. And so you don't think about what would it be to stop. You're just like, I gotta keep making these revolutions and keep going, you know?
yeah. Okay. So quick public service announcement. If you're new here, if you have a question, this isn't ask me anything, ask us anything. So if you have a question, I think there's a way to like raise your hand or step into the conversation, and we'll pull you in and we can chat. Otherwise we will just happy to chat between ourselves for the rest of the time, but would love to hear what folks have to say. So um okay, another thing that you had said, Katrina, that I thought was interesting was you were talking about how you decided you wanted to take time off, and then you're like, actually, I don't have enough money to do that. And so it seemed like this blend of an objection that I often hear, which is how could I possibly afford to take a sabbatical? And then this kind of like fire movement, like you went from not having very much savings at all, and you'd worked for quite a while at that point,
Yeah.
to like then having enough savings to enable you to take off for almost 2 years. So like, what was that like? What was the savings process like? How did you go about doing it? How did you think about how much money you'd actually need to take the time off that you wanted?
Yeah, well, as an actuary, I love me a good spreadsheet. So I was all about like trying to estimate those costs, right? So I thought about what is it that I want from this time, and what are the things I want to do to give myself the sort of like experiences I'm craving, but also address the sort of like underlying, deeper sort of spiritual needs that I have right now, and the sense of misalignment. And so I estimated about $38,000 to do it the way I thought I wanted to do it for 1 year. And so once I had that numerical goal, I was looking at the $1,500 in my bank account, the massive amount of MBA debt, and this dream. And so, what is true for me is that what my approach was a little bit fire in that, there were lots of things I did cut out, but I don't think for me personally, fire lifestyle is sustainable in the long term. Like I live a very simple life and I'm not like extravagant spender, but I do shop at Whole Foods as an example, right? And I am all about putting money into services and products that align with who I am as a person, what I value. And so the very first step for me was to figure out, if I'm making, at the time I think I was making like 97. If I'm making 97, why am I only sitting here with $1,500 in my account? Where is all this money going? And not where do I think it's going? Where is it actually going? So I built this spreadsheet to track my spending, and I tracked it for 2 months. I didn't change anything. I didn't judge myself for it. And then it was really eye opening to see these huge pockets of where I was spending way more money than I thought I was. So, like I talked about Whole Foods, I discovered I was spending about $700 on groceries a month. Like, which is insane as a single person. And so I was like, wow, that doesn't feel good, but I'm not willing to give up, shopping at Whole Foods because and the co-op, actually shopping at the co-op too, but I don't
Mhm.
want to give that up. But I could shop with a grocery list. I could shop and pay more attention to what's on sale. And so just by doing the two things in 1 month, I saved $350
Mm.
on my groceries, right? And so it was just taking all these categories for places I spend money and making different decisions. And so, like 7 months into saving, I had this opportunity to get a roommate. And I was like, well, I still want to live in a really nice apartment. I want to have my own bathroom, my own bedroom, my own separate area. I want to have heated, covered parking. I want to live in downtown. But I could do all of that and have a really fantastic place and have a roommate and still save money. And so that was a choice, I made for 12 months while I was saving that money. That really helped me stack it up faster. But, ultimately at the end of the day, it wasn't about deprivation, it was about prioritization. And so I got
Yeah.
really clear on what my priorities were, and not very many of them were more important to me than this break. And so a lot of that cash just went straight to planning for that break.
The New Englander in me is shaking my head about needing heated parking living in Atlanta.
Minnesota is no joke, DJ. It's
Okay,
no
okay.
joke.
That was General Mills days. Okay. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's definitely
and
general
then the
stay.
other part is like never go to the grocery store hungry. Is that like a advice? Like
A
you
hundred
have a list,
percent.
you're not just going and being like, I want to try those beet chips. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. I have a gluten allergy, so I'd be like, those $12 cookies sound interesting. So yeah, I mean, that really made a difference because I was just, spending a lot. And I also think, a lot of times we have lifestyle creep, or we also spend to kind of compensate for ways we feel less free. So for me in my job, it was like when I was having a bad day, it's like, well, I deserve this, right? So anything I wanted to spend on, it's like, well, I deserve, this is why I work hard. And yes, I can have anything I want, but it's like, is this really in alignment with what my soul really wants and what I really want? Or is it just more of a
Yeah.
reactionary, expense?
My my ears are burning because you're uncovering my boba tea habit. It's like I'm
Oh,
having a bad afternoon. I'm gonna spend
boba.
$8 on boba tea, which is not aligned with my goals. Um,
Yeah. I do love
I
boba though.
I would love to see that spreadsheet. I'm sure that it's like relatively simple, and I think people get really intimidated by the idea of making a budget because it's like there's a million things. But my experience is when you drill it down, it's like you can categorize it pretty easily. It's like eating out, eating
Yeah.
in, rent, car, like entertainment, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
Health,
when I was on
entertainment. Yeah.
yeah, when I was on my sabbatical, the first month or like 6 weeks, I was in New Zealand, and like I bought a motorcycle. I spent the time like riding around, camping, mountaineering, did like a meditation retreat. And at the end of it, I was doing I bought the motorcycle and I sold it at the end for basically the same amount to the same guy, actually.
Oh,
and then
nice.
um like camping and eating groceries and stuff like that. And I'd spent like $1,000 or something, maybe less than that. And the idea of, okay, here's how much money I would need to take a year off with current life. And you think about this other life where, if you're especially if you're traveling in developing countries, you can really, decrease your spending. It's not the same comparison. So like your burn rate on a regular, I live in Atlanta basis is so different from I'm traveling in Thailand or New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's even some level of what you spend on is different too, right? Like when you're living this sort of joyful, excited experience, right? It's kind of like some of the things that you might have spent money on just to compensate for not feeling so great or feeling burned out and trying to find a little bit of joy, but using money as what, the tool that you're throwing at these things. It really makes a difference. And so to your point, I think you can live off of so much less when you're on that sabbatical or on that break. And definitely, I mean, I made $40,000 last for 20 months, and I still had a tiny bit left to pay for rent and all of that when I came back to like the real world to get started. But yeah, it was definitely a lot cheaper.
That's amazing. So, okay. How did you budget for a trip in which you didn't fully know what you were going to do? Like, I'm assuming you didn't have it fully planned out, and like, or did you? And did you allow yourself the ability to kind of change over the course of your time?
Yeah. So I knew I had this 40K and I knew that there were four pieces to my break. So, one thing, when I'm coaching my clients, like the thing everybody has to do for me is they have to give me a purpose and four themes. And the themes are really the needs that you need from this experience. So, for me, connection was a big one. And so I spent the first 3 months of my break in a car doing a big circle through the US as a road trip. And I was spending about 60% of the time with friends and about 40% of the time staying in hotels or visiting places where I didn't know anyone. And so I guessed, I used like Google Maps and I was like, well, where are all the places I want to go?
Hmm.
And then I just kept rounding up on the miles and I knew how many miles to a gallon my car got. So I did simple math to figure out gas. And then I had like a budget for like my per night for any accommodation. And so, like, sometimes, right, I might pass through a place faster or stay less days than I would want to because I was over my budget, or if I was under my budget, then that gave me more time and more flexibility. But I always had like these anchor points to each of these phases. So that phase, I think it was like 5K. It was like the what I had in my mind. And so I was always sort of tracking to that number, and I could do more if I was doing well, or I would make different choices if I wasn't. And then I knew I wanted to go home for the holidays and spend an extended amount of time with my family. So like 2 or 3 months. So when I did that, I saved a crap money, right? I'm at home. I'm just spending visiting some friends more locally. And then I went abroad. And when I went abroad, I based it based on like the area that I was going. So Europe kind of got a bucket. I didn't really break it out into different countries because I wasn't exactly sure which countries I was going to go to. I spent 4 months in Southeast Asia. I remember my budget for that was around 5K, which is about what I spent. So I was trying to chunk it up into bigger pieces and then making decisions day by day, week by week on how I was doing. But what I was finding is that because I had overestimated and rounded up throughout my process, I was doing really well. And so
Hmm.
most of the time, I found that I had more money than I thought I did. And that's why I was able to keep going.
That's awesome. Um, so let's see, a question that I had about that. Spend how much time with your family. So the themes. How did you think about the themes, and did they change over the course of time?
Yeah. So working with a life coach is what I'll credit to really having the awareness to get clear on what success was before I started this process. And so what's really cool about my themes, and I have to tell you, it's really fascinating to see this for my clients too, they don't change. So my themes, I think, were adventure, connection. Another one was recovery, rest, right? Like just feeling that emotional burnout and mental burnout from work. And then the last piece was this lifestyle 4.0, and it was really thinking about what is this next chapter. I'm not sure what if I want to go back into my old career. I really didn't want to, but it was like maybe I have to, but I'm not sure. I want to explore other options. And so it was giving myself a lot of time to play around, take classes, network, have conversations, and figure out that next chapter. And what I have seen, even for my clients, I've had clients that have gone through a divorce that they weren't expecting, like during, their sabbatical. I have clients that have had to delay for different reasons, health reasons, whatever. They had to delay or move up their break. And the coolest thing is that in many different ways. In fact, I just had a call last week with somebody that's taking, as a family, they have two little kids, they're taking a sabbatical together, and they delayed it by 8 months. And
Hmm.
they're like, we went back to our themes, and it's crazy that they all still fit. However, the lens through how we bring them to life, right? The lens through which we see them, what the activities are, have changed, but the theme stays the same. Because I believe the theme is really like, what is my soul trying to create for me right now? And what is it that I need to feel restored? What is it I need to feel inspired? What is it that I need to feel motivated? And so I think whatever those themes are, they usually ring true through this whole experience. Maybe just the activities and how you bring them to life will change.
Yeah. One thing that, obviously you talked about having an actuarial background and the spreadsheets. On your website, you said that one of the outcomes of the sabbatical is that you learned how to master the art of chill.
Yeah.
How do you master the art of chill when you're so organized and planned?
I know. Oh my goodness. I know. It was really interesting. So I've actually taken sort of two breaks, but my first one was definitely more planned out because that
Mhm.
felt necessary for my budget, right? It's like I've got all these big dreams. I wanted to go do my yoga teacher training in Bali, and I wanted to, like eat a bunch of food in France. I had all this stuff I was going to do, and I was like, it takes money to do that. So I definitely
Yeah.
planned. But when I came back from Southeast Asia, I still had another 4 months. It ended up being 4 months where I just figured out what came next. And that for me was really the most decadent time as far as like just relaxing,
Mm,
just really taking days as they come, not planning things out,
yeah.
allowing for magic to happen or opportunities to appear, and then saying yes to those. And so I had those 4 months where the only thing I really focused on were taking courses that interested me. So they weren't like, business related. It was like how to ferment your own vegetables from scratch. And I was like, oh, I've always wanted to know how to do that. And so, I went to an adult enrichment course on how to do it. And so it was really allowing myself to be curious and to be interested and to be engaged while also finding that chill. And one of my clients, one of her themes is actually, her word for it is dolce far niente, which is like the art of just leisurely like being and sort of
Mm,
idleness. And she massive amounts of struggle to
yeah.
really lean into it. Like she wanted it, but when she was gifted this time, it was really difficult for her to just relax and not feel bad about not being productive, air quotes,
Yeah.
productive with her time.
Yeah. No, wait, what's the language that of that phrase?
Italian, I think it's an Italian term. Yeah.
Cool.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I definitely struggled with that. Did you say that time you took was towards the end of your sabbatical? Like that
Yeah,
four
yeah,
months?
it was for so on the road trip, there was some like recovery because I really tried not to plan out my day. So I was planning out my route, but I was going, I was sort of like spending time with friends, just hanging out. That wasn't like super intense, but the reentry period for me was about 4 months, and that was at the end. And that was, I definitely gave myself a buffer of time to not have to like update my resume right away or job search right away, to just give myself time to settle in, decompress, and really like fully restore after all that travel. Cause, like I restored a little and then I traveled a lot and it was
Yeah.
amazing, but it can also be exhausting in its own way. And so I kind of recharged back to 100% before I decided to go back into corporate.
Hmm. Um, because the reason I ask is because I think it can be difficult for folks. I know this is my experience towards the end of your time off, not like rushing into like you're watching your bank account go down
Yeah.
and you're like, I don't know if I should be planning on what I'm doing next or if I should still be in sabbatical mode. So, how did you set those boundaries and what do you encourage your clients to do along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. This is why I promote having a reentry period. So really setting aside more than a couple of weeks, like we're talking like, like a couple months, depending on how long your break is, setting
Hmm.
aside time to come back. Because I believe that no matter what you're doing, if you're, doing staycation life, if you're traveling the world, if you're writing a book, like whatever you're doing, to go from being on a break to working again
Yeah.
or starting a business or whatever your next chapter is, you've got to really process this break and you have to transition out of it and you have to really get clear on what your new goal is. And so I am a big believer in having a period of time where you don't have to rush to the next thing. What was true for me is that in those 4 months, I explored, I played, I definitely wrestled with questions and fear of like, what's going to come next. But I did not let myself job search until like the last, I don't know, last 6 to 8 weeks. I was like, I'm not job searching. I'm just playing around.
Hmm.
I'm throwing out a bunch of seeds to see what blooms. And then once I got serious about like, I might have to start looking for a job now, I really got clear on what's my biggest goal. And what was true for me at that point is that maybe one day I wanted to do my own thing and have this sort of like, financial freedom, location independence, all of the things. And so I was like, I need to be debt free. I need to pay off the last $45,000 of my student loans so that I can just be done. And when I thought about how do I know how to do that the fastest way possible, it was go back to corporate. And so that time allowed me to process my break, get clear on my goal. And then once I was ready to go back, from the day that I had finished updating my resume until the day I accepted a job, I landed 5 job offers in 5 weeks. And one of them was like a raise and a promotion, and one of them was like a career change, and like one of them was a dream job. And so, having that time and not rushing to the next thing and not being in a place of desperation or panic absolutely benefits you when you're coming back from a break. And I also think it lets all of the benefits you've acquired over this experience like settle into your bones so that you
Yeah.
can speak about it in a way that gets people excited and that highlights what an amazing and transformational experience it was.
Yeah. Okay. So you had, as part of that last segment, you had parts where you weren't applying for jobs, and then you gave it enough time so that you could like apply for jobs and have stuff come up organically. So it wasn't like I have 2 weeks and it would force you
Yeah.
into taking it the first job that came.
Exactly. Yeah. I was determined not to take the first job. I was like, I have a goal to get out of debt, but I'm not willing to compromise my happiness for that. So I'm willing to compromise a little, like, like it doesn't have to be my dream job, but it ended up I found this amazing opportunity that I was really excited about, that ended up working out. So it was like perfect.
Yeah. Tell me about, one of the big fears folks tend to have is like, how am I going to explain it? How is it going to look on a resume? Like you took
Yeah.
I think, extraordinarily long sabbatical. And
Uh-huh.
so it's not
I
like just
did.
taking 3 months off. So like you mentioned that it gave you more confidence on your site. And then you kind of talked about how, you could like congeal all the learnings and talk about it in a compelling way. Like how did you talk about it? What'd you focus on? And what strategies would you recommend for folks?
Yeah, so I talked about it a lot in my cover letter. So I really decided in my brain, I decided before I started looking for jobs that I benefited wildly from this break. And any company that got me as a future employee was going to benefit wildly from me being this version of myself because of this break. So I had to decide, right? I had a recruiter early on who had reached out to me while I was on a break, and I was like, oh, I'm not looking right now, but I'll connect with you when I am. And I reached out to her, and she was like, not having it. She had this conversation with me and she was like, listen, I just want to tell you, I think your goals are a little high. And, taking this time off is a red flag. And not that you can't find a job, but I really want you to set your sights a little lower. And I want you to think about taking a step back in pay and in promotion level, and that not that you won't be able to get back to where you were, but companies are going to really ding you for this, and so I just want you to be prepared. And I was like, thank you so much for sharing your opinion, and absolutely no, I will not work with you, right? And I didn't work with her, and she was absolutely wrong, but she was wrong because I decided she was wrong, right? I could have easily decided that she was right and then
Mhm.
started like applying for jobs that were lower than what my experience was, and accepting pays that like a pay or a salary that didn't fit what I was looking for. So you have to decide is number one. And I think one of the best things you can do, it's really simple, is just write out all of the things you got from this experience. So for me, what was true, I was super restored, right? So in my cover letter, I talked a lot about feeling out of alignment in my past life and how, I took this trip, I traveled around the world, I went solo, I got trained as a yoga instructor, and I was no longer available, right? To like not live in that alignment. And so the jobs I was applying for, there was always something I was genuinely excited about. It could be the
Mhm.
location, it could be the team, it could be the role. And I leaned into that. And it was like, I am this restored, inspired, like really confident human being who has all of this great experience. And I want you to benefit from that. I want to like bring it to your company and let you benefit from that. And I also want to show you that I am only here for jobs that really click with me and that I'm passionate about. And so the job I got was in the natural and organic product industry, which obviously, like the whole food, like the Whole Foods aisles come to life. It's like, I'm that person. And I
Mhm.
think part of my break, right, with that story, that connection, connecting those dots is I'm going to live in alignment, and I'm really passionate about what you guys do. And I'm going to show up with that passion. And I take it so seriously that I will honor what is true for me. And I want to bring all of my skills to this job. And I was actually underqualified on paper. They wanted 5 years of experience in market research, and I had 3, right? But
Mhm.
I was like, General Mills is a great company. I have a lot of experience. And I also believe that this break sets me apart. And ultimately, everybody else is coming to that interview with a similar background, similar experiences, and you get to be the shining star that has done something really different, that has thought outside of the box, that has found the confidence to like really honor yourself and be an innovative thinker in a way. And it's like, who doesn't want that person on their team, right? Like
Mhm.
part of the dynamic is, do I want to hang out with these people? Do I want to work with these people? And the answer is going to be yes. So that was my belief going into it. And it pays off for me. And I see it happen for my clients too. Some of them have even been poached out of their break. Like they've ended it earlier than they thought because they've been recruited out of a break by somebody that used to
Yeah.
work with them.
No, I love that. You're getting some applause here.
Nice.
So, and one thing that I find fascinating is that um, I think one um, trend that I see is that folks towards the end of their sabbatical are getting stressed. Um, and like partially they're getting stressed because they don't think they fully know what the next thing is that they want to do. And so like, excuse me if I'm projecting here, but it's like you knew that you wanted to get closer to the next thing you wanted to do. You knew that like your values, more clarity around your values being aligned, and you knew that the next thing you wanted to do was, unlocking this kind of debt-free aspect. And so the absolute next thing you wanted to do wasn't the dream job. And I
Yeah.
found that like the realizations, the learnings, the clarity around the lessons of time off sometimes can take like the next job or the next job to fully surface or manifest themselves.
You are so right. And I think that can be a hard truth to swallow because you feel different, right? After this experience, you're like, I don't want to go back to the old way. And I'm this new me. And I just want it all to like feel good. And that's cool. And it definitely can happen for some people. But to your point, I think it had like the dust had to settle, right? It had to settle. And so in absence of having this epiphany about some new career path that you want to take, what was true for me was like, what is my goal? And I knew financial freedom, like I said, was that bridge to a life that felt free in many ways beyond that. And so it was,
Hmm.
how can I create financial freedom, i.e., pay off all this debt as fast as possible, but also enjoy the experience of life while I'm doing it? And so, I found this job with an industry I was passionate about already, like nerded out about, but it was also in Boulder. And I was living in Denver. I'd moved to Denver at the time. And so it was like, oh my gosh, I get to live in Boulder. This is even better. And so it just all kind of, worked out. And it ultimately, it was a dream job to go back to corporate as far as
Mm.
that lens goes. But to your point, it wasn't the ultimate dream, right? But it was a great next step to get there.
And then what? And I grew up in Denver, so I would love to find a
Oh,
way to get back there. But what then made you? So is that the only job that you took before kind of starting your own practice, or what? How did you decide when to leave that? How did you decide when the next step time was right, besides financially?
yeah. Oh, so good. So I was in that job for a year. And then the role kind of changed, and I was not so in love with the aspects of my job that I had. And I was like, oh, I'm not really feeling this so much. And I had two women that had started their own business when I worked at General Mills. I'd hired them as a vendor, but their company kept growing over those 5 years. And so they actually reached out to me like, hey, we have no idea if you're interested, but we need someone like you to come join our team. And
Mm.
so I actually moved back to Minnesota and took a pay cut because I was so passionate about working with them. And I still
Hmm.
paid off all of those student loans in less than 2 years, all that 45K, like I paid it off in less than 2 years. But I worked with them and it was awesome. But what also was true is that I knew that like once I became debt free, I wanted to do my own thing and I wanted to do something that had more impact. So I started getting certified as a life coach right around the time that I became debt free. So when I realized like my goal end in sight, I'm making it happen, I started getting certified as a possibility of what I could do next. And I remember I had this one day in my second job when I was back in Minnesota where I had taken a lot of vacation days in the month of May. So I had this 9-day trip to Italy, and then I had this like 1 week training for like a coaching thing. And they knew I was doing that on the side. And I remember I forgot to request my vacation like many months in advance. I still was requesting it like 6 to 8 weeks in advance, but it was like
Hmm.
I forgot to request it like 6 months in advance. But I told them when I booked the tickets, I'm going to Italy. And I remember having to talk to them both then and again in my annual review about how I needed to like ask their permission before I planned a big vacation. And it was like a switch in my brain when it came back up where I was like, I'm not available to be an employee anymore. Like it's time to do my own thing, because for me, that was what freedom felt like. And freedom is like one of my highest values. And so I think that was the point where I was like, I feel ready to go now, right? Like no hard
Mm.
feelings, but I just felt like these aren't the constraints that I want to like live in. This isn't the reality I want to experience. And now I've got my certification. I'm just going to take a leap.
I love it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, one thing about your story, you talk about returning with more confidence in yourself and, willing to kind of shoot for things that people might tell you you're not qualified for. Like, what is it about taking that break or taking that leap of faith or the risk to take off that leads to returning with more confidence?
I mean, I feel like you're living in an alternate reality. It's like you kind of escape the matrix. And I feel like, I think you see your life and you see reality so different. In some ways, it's kind of like business school, right? Like you talked about, you get there and it's just all these different ways of being, and it kind of awakens you to like all these possibilities. And I feel like when you take a break, you have become a person that is strong enough to escape status quo and really just see your life almost like from a different perspective. And so a lot of my clients do go back into, like working a corporate job, but they do it with this awareness. It's almost like if you're in the matrix, you get out, you see it, and then you choose to go back in. That's a whole different experience because
Hmm.
you know why you're doing it and you have much more aligned goals and like what you're doing when you're in that. But I feel like it takes an immense amount of courage to do something with so much uncertainty, to honor yourself. And if you do this experience and you are really thoughtful about, giving yourself what you need and you come back stronger, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't die. I didn't become homeless. You know what I mean? Like I didn't ruin my whole entire life. And life is actually pretty good. And I just think it's such an empowering place to then make future decisions from versus I can't, like, all the fears, right? I can't do it because of this. I can't do it because I have kids. I can't do it because I have debt. I can't do it because
Yeah.
I have a partner. I can't do it because my job is so niche. There'll never be another opportunity for me. Like, these are all reasons why, past clients of mine have thrown out and thought that they couldn't take a break. And it's like when you realize that those are just, I mean, they're kind of just excuses. I mean, some of them are big ones. I get it. Like, there's a time and a season for everyone. Not everyone can do it tomorrow. But it's like if you really want to, if you really need it and you really want it, there's a way to plan to make it happen, even though it might not happen tomorrow. You can make that dream, be a reality. And I think once you realize that, you're like, oh my gosh, if I can do that, what else can I do?
Yeah, yeah. No, that one of the things I like about your story is the delayed gratification aspect of both getting to your dream job and also having the money to take time off, right? Like when the first thing I hear of when folks are like, I can't afford taking time off, and again, there's a ton of privilege, financial privilege, like psychological privilege, what we think is
Yes.
possible associated with
Mm-hmm.
sabbaticals. But the financial one, I think, is true for almost everyone immediately. Like I couldn't take, I don't know if
Yeah,
but if you say like, okay, this is so important to me that I'll budget for it for 5 years, right? Or like I'm going to do this when my kids are a certain age, then it's a matter of saving like 5% a year, which is very different than saying like,
absolutely.
can I blow up my career and my bank account like next month? Like very few people are going to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There is this delayed sense of gratification. And I think the process usually gets sped up because when you get really honed in on a goal, you start to realize all the ways that you can tweak the way that you're living now to
Mhm.
get you there faster because you get obsessed with it. You're like, I don't want to wait. I want to figure out, I want to hack this program and I want to figure out how I can get there sooner.
Yeah. I have two more questions on that topic, but I just want to open it up to folks. Last chance, if you want to come in, ask a particular question. Doesn't matter if it's totally self-serving, but raise your hand or whatever the button is, and we'll bring you in. Um, okay, so a couple of questions. One, and I think this is like a curveball. I don't know if you're ready for this, but uh,
Okay.
like you are a solopreneur, I'm a solopreneur. We're both advocating for sabbaticals. Like when's your next sabbatical and like what would you do?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I have taken two already. I haven't taken, yeah, it's been a hot second, but I took one in 2018.
Mhm,
Um, but I feel like for me, I am trying to learn how to incorporate mini sabbaticals into my life because I think as a solopreneur, right, this is your business. I don't have a team at this point. So it's like when I'm gone, I'm gone. And so now I'm starting to play with, how do I create these pockets of time? So like I have taken off 2 weeks for my birthday. And it's like
mhm,
managing around that challenge of can I take 2 weeks off, and just make that happen. At the end of last year, full disclosure, I hit a burnout wall. Like I had just pushed so
mhm,
hard all year. My aunt passed away in September, and that was very unexpected. And I was just feeling really exhausted. And so I ended up sort of deciding that I needed to take the last 6 weeks of the year off. And it was
mhm,
really hard. Honestly, it was really hard to come back from that. And so that was like an awareness moment for me. Like, can I start to really think about creating the space to do this more regularly and maybe start smaller and scale it up? But I think you have to start somewhere. Like we all have to start somewhere. And so
yeah,
for me, that 2 week window of pure bliss and figuring out how to keep my business running while I'm gone is my current challenge. But you never know, DJ. Sometimes I get that like itch where I'm like, I just need a break and I want to go travel some more. And then
yeah,
things happen.
yeah. Evan raised a hand, but I'm gonna come back to you and hold you accountable for what you said earlier, which is like the importance of totally shutting off. So you're not off the hook yet. All right, I'm gonna bring Evan
Okay.
in. Hey Evan. Katrina, can you hear him?
I can't, but I'm wondering if it's because we've muted the tab.
Yeah, Evan, go ahead. All right. Yeah, cool. Katrina.
So it was muted on my end and I like unmuted it at the very end. Can you paraphrase what Evan just said? Sorry.
Yeah. Evan asked about what your favorite resources are for folks thinking about going sabbatical. So communities, like resources, sites, that kind of thing.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So, I love podcasts and I've been on some podcasts and talked about career breaks. So I think, some people, if travel is a piece of it, if travel is something that you would like to do, I think there are travel podcasts that talk about the financial aspect of travel and longer term travel, slow travel, points and miles as well, which was actually part of how I afforded a break. So I think collecting that information can be helpful. I know that Lisa Hawashi, I think, has a podcast called Leap Like Me. And I believe she interviews people that have taken breaks. So, if you want some inspiration and you want to hear stories, you could check out podcasts like that. I have a YouTube channel and I interview past clients. And so if you want some like, how did they do it? What, like breakdown, just looking me up on YouTube and checking those out, checking those interviews out can be really informative. I get a lot of people that say it's sort of a mix of inspiration and also like tactical knowledge that they really like having. And then I think, as far as like tools and resources, it depends on where you feel like your current challenge is, right? So if it's the mindset and the fear stuff, right, it might be taking free resources from coaches or really just doing deep dives into, what am I really afraid of? What is my plan for that? If these worst fears come to life, what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I not willing to sacrifice? But if it's more of the logistical, planning stuff, I think hearing other people's stories or setting up a spreadsheet or just taking those steps can be really helpful. But all in all, what was really, really helpful for me, because, my break was almost 10 years ago and there wasn't really a lot of resources at all. Even social media wasn't what it was today for like finding those stories. So it was just really talking to people that had done it. So I had to ask friends of friends if
Mhm.
they knew anyone that had done it and just interviewing them and asking them questions about it. And then just doing a lot of research on the places I thought I wanted to go and listening to travel podcasts was kind of what I did.
Awesome. Yeah, I would echo what you said. I hadn't heard of those, so I'm gonna look those up as well. And obviously, like the work that I'm doing at the sabbatical project, we're trying to collect stories that like live on the website. So giving that kind of permission that Katrina talked about. But as far as like a more live helping platform, we have a Facebook group, the Sabbatical Project, where you can ask questions, things like that. And I'm also open to exploring other platforms. There's obviously Discord and Slack, though. Slack kind of gives me hives, like thinking about work, so it's hard to like it's hard to think about time off on Slack. But Evan, happy to connect, and if you have suggestions on what a platform, what it should look like, and what platforms should be used, happy to explore that. Katrina, I love how you're doing interviews with past clients. I think that's great. One thing we found in the research is that the biggest predictor of whether someone will take a sabbatical, is whether they have like an exemplar, someone that looks
Oh.
like them or has like their experience, or they can kind of look up to say like, okay, like the water is warm and safe. So
Oh, I love that. That's such a great learning. I think what you're doing is so cool, DJ, and it just is going to make it so much more accessible and practical for people. But I love that. And I feel like everybody has a reason why they think they can't. And so I try to do a cross section, the people with the kids, the people that are further along in their career and like ending, heading towards retirement. And it's like, what will life look like if I'm not quite ready to retire, but I'm coming back into the job market, people
mm,
with debt. So I just think it's important for people to be able to see themselves and other people's stories.
yeah, cool. Okay, any other questions, or else we're gonna shut this puppy down for now. But Katrina, I loved the conversation. I feel like we didn't have any dead zones, and I've like still so many questions um about like your experience. And we're not done, because I'm gonna nail you against the wall on this. Like, we have to find a way to be sabbatical advocates and also take this extended leave to like really unplug, get that creativity, come up with new ideas. Like,
Yeah.
one of the things I'm trying to have people think about is it's it's this notion that you go on sabbatical to fix something, versus I think what Michael Pollan calls like the betterment of well people, like his like advocacy for psychedelics, like not just to treat like PTSD and depression, but um, like I think that we wait until like something's broken to do something like this, and we should be
Yeah.
thinking about it as just like a regular kind of like dental checkup, right? Instead of the root canal.
Agreed. Oh, I love that. Yes.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again so much. And thanks y'all for tuning in. Appreciate it. Be in touch.